Welcome. This is the evolution of digital fashion from 3D e-commerce to the Metaverse and Beyond. Who will be hosting the panel is NATASCHA French. She is the principal at Scale Strategies. NATASCHA is a pioneer in defining and shaping the immersive technology market, in particular AR, MR, and XR, and AI, leading engagements for Fortune 500 brands. She's focused on media, entertainment, sports, retail, as well as consumer goods and healthcare. NATASCHA is the CEO and founder of Scale Strategies, a sales and marketing agency that serves as a growth engine for technology-based organizations. She currently serves as the chapter president of Los Angeles for the VR/AR Association, and prior to founding Scale Strategies, she was the CEO of Ventana. Let's give a big welcome to the panel and to NATASCHA.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Super excited to moderate today two of my favorite things, fashion and tech. As most of you have heard the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of news in the space, from Facebook's recent announcement to becoming Meta, Nike's filing of several new virtual good trademarks, Gucci outfitting Gen Zs in the metaverse, Coca-Cola doing auctions in the NFT. So today we're going to cover a lot of those things across, but I'm super excited to be having a panel of experts next to me. So to get started, I'm going to do a quick intro and have them give a little bit about their background. We thought we'd mix it up and do a fun fact about each of them, and then they can kind of talk about all things metaverse. I'll start with my fun fact. In addition to loving and living in the XR world, I once was a manufacturer of high explosives, so ask me about that after. But I'm going to start with RAFFAELLA Camara. She's the head of brands and advertisers solutions at Epic Games and Unreal Engine. Her fun fact, she was the national Italian swimming champion when she was only 3.5 for the age range of 6 and under. So please welcome RAFFAELLA, and if you want to give an introduction of yourself.
Yeah, I didn't grow very much, you see it right now, so I wouldn't have gone much further after that, but at the time, I was really good, and I still swim. No, it's very nice to be here today. Thank you for having us. Yes, Head of Brands and Advertiser Solutions at Epic Games and Unreal Engine. That means that I'm really working on figuring out what are the collaborations that we can create with consumer brands, with advertising agencies, but also with companies in the tech consumer space, so that we can help move forward the creation of an open metaverse for all creators.
Very cool. And sitting next to her, please welcome LINDSAY AAMODT. She's the Senior Director of Marketing at Together Labs. Together Labs empowers people worldwide to connect, create, and earn in virtual worlds. Her fun fact, she was an Olympic figure skater. So please welcome LINDSAY and hear a little bit about yourself.
So I'm really grateful that I'm sitting, because as a former figure skater, I'm not very graceful on the floor, and I haven't worn heels in over 20 months. So I'm just really glad that we're sitting and you're not going to see me fall somewhere. So I've been with Together Labs as the head of marketing for IMView, which is a company underneath that parent company, for the past 7 years. This year, we had so much fun doing the IMView fashion show, where we could really demonstrate how brands could have some kind of connection to the end user in a really immersive experience, and have virtual goods that make them fall in love with those brands even more. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And next to her, we have Ashley Crowder, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ventana. Ventana is leading the charge to make 3D fast and scalable for e-commerce. Ashley will be sharing some exciting funding news that they just had last week. And a fun fact about Ashley, she worked at Blockbuster Video.
Yeah, so from very old content to the newest content. But yeah, Ventana, we are a SaaS platform that makes 3D and AR e-commerce fast and easy at scale. We work with clients like Hugo Boss and Diesel, as well as furniture companies. 3D's proven to double conversion rates and increase cart size, but we're also setting them up for success to take advantage of all the amazing things happening in the metaverse, because step one is you need a 3D asset to do all that stuff. So super excited to be here and with everyone else who's making the metaverse a reality.
Very cool. Thanks, Ashley. And then finally, we have DONNIE DINCH. DONNIE is the CEO of Bitsky. Bitsky lets creators, brands, and platforms easily create, sell, and purchase NFTs. And Donnie's fun fact, his first workers' comp claim was when he was 16.
Yes, thank you so much. Not an athlete. So Bitsky is, we got really excited about NFTs in 2018, and we wanted to, be able to buy and sell all of the assets that we're having in games, and we recognized there was a huge gap between what exists at the time and what needs to exist in order to make that a reality. And so, we spent the past 3 years building a set of services and APIs, and along with a marketplace and a wallet that really abstracts the complexity of blockchain and cryptocurrency, and just allowing people to own and purchase, sell digital goods.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And to get started, we'll start in the present. So I'll have Ashley get started here. Where are brands today with 3D adoption?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of brands within the fashion and furniture space, and many of them are actually designing in 3D today. So if they design and manufacture products for apparel, they're using programs like Clo and Browseware. For footwear, it's Moto, Keyshot, Rhino. There are so many different programs, and they all have their own flavor of 3D. But what's great is they're really starting to design here and use them to replace physical prototypes. And then where Ventana comes in is we help optimize them so they can actually use them in other places. But this is huge because the creation of digital twins has been such a barrier for these brands to get into the metaverse, to do things in game engine or social media in 3D or AR. But digital product creation teams are really seeing the value, because if you don't have to create a physical prototype, you're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars and getting faster to market and being able to actually test things out before, not to mention it's better for the environment. So it's been really exciting to see that. And COVID, of course, just like expedited all of that because everything's stuck on a boat and you can't get it, so.
No, great, and kind of building off that and open to anyone really is, how can brands expedite this and where it can be used? So kind of we can touch on kind of what real-time 3D is and why does it matter? If you want to touch on that.
Sure. I mean, to go off actually and continue for what Ashley was saying, if you look at different industries, different brands some are using real-time 3D even more than others. Automotive, for example, is practically changing the way that they are designing, building, and selling automotive vehicles and cars with real-time 3D. They need to create digital assets, and they want to create just one single source, kind of like digital twin that has to be very precise and high fidelity, and then reuse that across the entire spectrum of ways that they can connect with consumers. Anything from, again, R&D and design, internally manufacturing, but also car configurators. It could be human-machine interface type of things, or anything else that is marketing or advertising related. Similarly, I think anything that is fashion or apparel is very much learning how to use real-time 3D to connect with consumers, either to showcase their collections or to create new collections in metaverse worlds, in games, or anything else where consumers like to change their persona or their identity depending on how they feel or where they're at. And so these digital items allow them to do that.
Yeah, and just touching on the real-time aspect, I mean, auto has been in the 3D space forever, designing cars, and I think fashion and other industries are just catching up. Yeah. And it's so important to start with real-time in mind. Otherwise, you're recreating assets, you're having to edit them, change materials. But it's so important as a brand to think about, where do you want to use this 3D asset? Is it going to be an NFT? Do you want to use it in Unreal Game Engine? So potentially my Fortnite character can wear it, and you need to be thinking about that first and not the opposite, because then your digital product creation team will hate you because they're recreating assets over and over again.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I know what I'm most excited to hear from each of you is you guys have been building some really cool stuff. So I'd love if you guys can touch or what are some of the best use cases you've each seen in 3D fashion?
I can take that. So we actually worked with smaller brands that were up and coming in the Fashion Week space, and at the time during the pandemic, there wasn't really a fashion week. They were creating, videos to showcase their goods in Vogue and Elle and Harper's Bazaar. But they were really struggling with the sell-through and the brand expansion. And so what we offered them was an opportunity to actually maintain the integrity of the garment and create it on an avatar that was more human-looking, so that we could preserve the integrity of the couture and the cut and sew that goes behind that. And I think in doing that and then creating this interactive environment where it could be an extension of their brand, what it offers the consumer is this opportunity to get to know the brand more than just the physical item, but feel like the essence and the ethos of that brand and get excited about buying into it and having this really intimate relationship with the garment and the brand itself. So.
We've also seen, I guess from the NFT side, fashion becoming probably one of the largest inbound customer segments that we have. Recently, a few months ago, there's the sneaker designer Jeff Staple, who's famous for designing his own set of dunks, did a drop with Bitsky where you got digital variants of a sneaker, and there's a physical component to it. It was kind of an afterthought, and he actually his revenue and digital sales surpassed his physical sales this year. I'd imagine that's not the last time we're going to hear a story of a fashion brand, selling through digital content that can be worn in different places. Obviously, the margins are considerably higher. You don't need to worry about ships being blocked at ports. And yeah, so I mean, as far as unique uses of 3D, we've seen that. Also, there's a handful of games that these sneakers and things can be worn in, and I see that being probably one of the most important parts. I forget who was mentioning it, but you have this. We all dress a certain way in real life to sort of express ourselves, to share who we are, to kind of frame our personality as we start to talk and get to know people. And we do that in a digital place too, and certainly young people do that in a digital place. And I would argue that the emotional attachment that people have to who they are in a digital place is sometimes stronger than that in the physical world. So with that comes an attached value, which I think is a big deal. So what we've seen with Jeff has been super exciting. There's been a handful of other sneaker brands. There's another one called Artifact, which is actually digitally native sneakers that's doing incredibly cool things.
Very cool. I know, Raphael, if you want to touch on that as well.
Well, there is one that's very near and dear to our heart, which is Balenciaga. We have had a long-standing collaboration and partnership with Balenciaga, and they're an innovator in their own right, bringing technology into design and fashion. And I think what they've done over the past year in particular is they really were able to blend the physical and the virtual. They did a variety of different things. They first used Unreal Engine to create and showcase their fall 2021 collection, creating a video that is the story of two characters, a love story taking place in the future, and everything, all the scenery, all the clothing, everything is built in Unreal, and even the models are actual Balenciaga models that were captured volumetrically and then turned into digital humans using MetaHuman Creator. We helped them recreate 4 outfits and accessories meticulously, and we brought them into Fortnite itself, so players could use them as skins. We also helped create a virtual Balenciaga store in Fortnite Creative with virtual 3D billboards where you could see the entire collection showcasing. And finally, we took those same assets and backgrounds into real cities. So in London, New York, Seoul, and Tokyo, we placed 3D billboards, and it's the same assets that are showing, and those specific pieces of clothing were for sale in Balenciaga stores or online. So you can see how everything kind of comes together, but it starts in a way from a real-time 3D and the creation of digital assets in that sense.
Yeah, it's exciting. And I know, Ashley, you're working with a ton of brands. I don't know if there's one in particular you want to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, we're kind of more the infrastructure to make it easier to manage, distribute 3D, but I think working with Diesel was really great. We worked, again, with their fashion designers, the way they design today, and being able to leverage those same 3D models for the B2B sale, as well as on their e-com site. So it wasn't having to recreate things from scratch, have these one-offs. It's like they started and changed their whole process across their organization to get 3D on the e-commerce site, and it increased average cart size by 70%. So like just being able to see a 3D version of a product instead of a 2D image gives customers such more confidence to make that purchase online. And so we always say, okay, that's step one. Now once you have that, you can sell digital assets and have this whole new revenue stream. We can dress characters in the metaverse. I mean, kids don't hang out at the mall anymore. They hang out in games, and that's where they want to look cool. So you just think about that. That's where fashion needs to go.
No, I love it. I know Donnie touched on this a bit, and I think this is what's really fascinating. In the physical world, I bought these yellow shoes because I like them, but also maybe because it shapes the perception of myself and of others of me, right? But in the metaverse, this enhances that because there's interactions, and it allows people to participate in ways that you might not have in real life. And I think with this, and I give this to all of you guys, is it digital or physical first, and what are the benefits?
I think it's obviously digital first moving forward.
Yeah.
I think that I go back to Artifact, I mentioned them. I mean, they're literally running every sneaker brand's 2028 playbook. They're dictating it and talking to CEOs of the bigger sneaker brands on the planet. They're well aware.
And I think it's digital too, but even from a different standpoint of, when we're working with brands, it's like you can create a 3D version. You can create every single 2D render you need, so you don't need a photo shoot. You can take that 3D model and do virtual product testing, so you can actually test that with hundreds of thousands of people instead of just the 30 people you would mail that physical sample to. And so then you can actually make design changes before investing in expensive molds. Like it's digital first, but it's changing like every aspect of a product and how you go to market.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think when I say digital first too, I also think that there's going to be entirely new fashion lines and brands that are just digital only.
For sure.
In addition, but I do think you have more expertise on existing.
We got to get there, yeah. But no, Hunter's like DressX and the Fabricant, amazing digital only clothes.
Yeah.
So.
See, with InView, being more of like a social metaverse where there's avatars that dress themselves from the state of self-expression, that self-expression is something that's unique to them. And so what's interesting about branded goods is that when we sell to the consumer an ideal look, they actually turn away from that because they want to utilize elements of that look to create their own new look. So I kind of look at the digital asset as a top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel at that true point of purchase from this standpoint. First of all, I think that brands and companies are going to be looking to the metaverse to create a new presence, similar to the way that they market to their consumer on Instagram, where they utilize this really integrated experience, whether it be like native ads and banners and avatars wearing these garments to fall in love with the brand. And that's kind of like that first engagement point, which would, if it's on their avatar, they'll fall in love with the physical item more and then purchase the physical item because they understand through the 3D rendering the fidelity of, that item. The bottom of the funnel, though, is interesting because with the digital asset, we're seeing that the, NFTs are really starting to become a major fashion play which really lends itself to the consumer persona of wanting to have something that's uniquely theirs. Something that nobody else has that really elevates their personal self-expression. Having a custom item for themselves or buying a Nike NFT means that they are, the creme de la creme. And, NFTs certainly are, from a brand perspective, going to go towards, the top fans of that particular brand. But it also is taking us closer and closer to where I really think we're going, which is true ownership. And being able to have some kind of real value with these items is going to be definitely the future for fashion. And so that's why I see the top and the bottom of the funnel.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. There's not very much left for me to say. But certainly from a design and production perspective, yes, it's digital first. I think it will become more and more digital first. It makes more sense. It reduces the production workflow. It allows you to share and collaborate and experiment in different ways. Everyone can participate. Lots of different reasons to do that. I think from a consumer perspective, I am hoping that a digital presence and NFTs or anything else will become a little bit more democratized or not as elitist, and maybe it will even help, particularly the younger generation, not spend so much time on things like fast fashion or throwing things away, but changing maybe their personality digitally a little bit more and have a truer physical type of presence, maybe.
No, I know, it's true. I still go into the store and like to touch the fabric, so I'm the old school. But I'm super excited to see it now before it comes to the store.
Remember when you would not buy anything from the internet, right? You're like, oh, no, I have to go to the store and try it on.
Exactly, and that's definitely changed. I bought it online. Well, I recently read just the NFTs were up to 10.7 billion in sales in the third quarter from 1.3 billion in second. So obvious things are growing there. So I'd love to start with you, Donnie. How do NFTs fit into all of this? And how would you say tokens are being used for a gateway in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So that number is astronomical. And I would, to be completely candid, it's kind of nonsense. I think that it is, there's a lot of people coming into NFTs and buying these things, and it's a lot of individual people wanting to support like their own, micro influencer. We did something with this artist on Instagram that has maybe 40 or 50,000 followers. It's never been able to monetize his Instagram very well, and he did a NFT drop, and he sold like $30,000 worth of things in like under a minute. And so it just dramatically, I think in general, any new technology does a really good job of extracting value where it's always been, but otherwise hard to mine out. I think NFTs are starting to do that in some way. But I think you're gonna see, you've seen a wave of, there's been some speculative nature. You guys have all probably seen these in the super expensive people and all these different things. Those are all fun. I think the way to look at it is that those are driving headlines that are getting people to come into the space and to build and to understand the technology. The amount of conversations that have happened over the past years, like Illuminati level, of people trying to understand what this is. So that's quite exciting. I don't know, was there a question?
Yeah.
How are tokens being used for a gateway?
Oh yeah, sure. So, sorry about that. Well, I think, there's a lot of different utility that comes with NFTs. I think the mistake would be to think of them as just JPEGs. I think you can think of NFTs today as sort of, websites in the mid-90s, like we're all kind of mind blown that we have pictures and text on these things, but there's considerably more things that you can do with them. And so what we're seeing right now is that, I'll go back to Artifact again, they were selling just a 3D model that you could look at of a sneaker, but you can go take it into this game sandbox, and it's you can actually wear the sneaker, and it actually helps you run faster. And so there's a lot of different avenues that I'm seeing with that. Also, NFTs are being used to engage with fans and communities better, so you can actually gate content to say a private Discord, where you have to connect a wallet, and you have to have a certain number of tokens or a individual NFT in your wallet in order to have access to that server, which has been extremely popular. And I think that works for everyone from we're going to do a fashion line, or I am an entertainer or an actor or somebody that just wants to have a better relationship with my fans. NFTs are an interesting medium to doing a lot of these different things.
That's super interesting. I look at NFT as just it's contract of ownership within the digital world, and now that there's 3D, to your point of, I want to bring that Gucci purse from Roblox into Fortnite into this other place, and I think as we figure out ways to democratize those 3D assets to use them in all these different virtual worlds, that's where it gets really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing to think about is that it is this like authenticity, this idea that I own this thing, but also the blockchain contains a set of rules of what this thing can actually do in other places. And that's incredibly fascinating. And so, maybe I own like the Fortnite Balenciaga sweatshirt, but whenever I bring it into, I don't know, this pirate ship game, it's actually the flag on my pirate ship and I can go faster or something like that. And so, we've seen this with sneakers or Jordans, for example, where, we use them for not the original thing that they were intended for. And I think we're going to see that in a digital place too. So super exciting. And I guess the last thing, because I know I'm talking a lot, it really does democratize, I think, creation for a lot of creators. Talking about fashion, there is no longer a requisite of having to go through procurement of manufacturing and distribution and understanding anything about a supply chain. You can just be a really great blender artist in Bulgaria and compete with Nike, and that's absolutely fascinating. I think that we will probably see via NFTs and this idea of digital ownership likely the relatively largest economic shift that we've seen since the Industrial Revolution. And I'm a very big pragmatist, but I genuinely believe that.
I agree with that point that you just made, Donnie, because, an NFT with the rules that it inherently has built into it for these multi-channel applications or entry points, InView has a creator economy where users create digital items and they sell them to other users. It's really difficult to avoid any kind of copycat or fraud within the economy. But with the NFTs, especially NFTs built within the metaverse, it actually protects the creator from others that might steal that item from them because of the codes that actually establish that as an NFT. And I really think it's super empowering for the creator mentality. And I think that's a very positive thing. The other thing is, in terms of the resale value, one of the items that we actually created for the InView fashion show, we sold on OpenSea, and it sold for a very nominal amount. It wasn't the $30,000 you make with your first time, cash cow, which is amazing. It was like $100, right? And it wasn't until 4 months later, fast forward to New York Fashion Week, where news comes out about this particular brand. And of course, the NFT space had that mental recall of being in this fashion show with InView. And so they actually searched for that item in OpenSea, and the resale was 10x more. And so if you look at from a marketer's perspective, how to create these moments to increase the value, and then also offer that utilitarian aspect where you can bring it into the metaverse and it actually provides more value or more access for the user, I think it becomes a really interesting play for both the creator, the seller, the marketing strategy, the brand strategy. It really kind of helps the whole, it kind of helps everybody, which is a good thing,
Well, to your point of helping creators and authenticity, I think it's really interesting when you can use NFTs to tie back to the physical goods as well. Of we're talking with some brands, if you're at a thrift store and trying to buy that Prada purse, is that Prada purse real? Well, there could be an NFT that comes with it to authenticate that. And so, I think that combination of the physical and digital with NFTs is really exciting too.
Yeah, and even staying away from the exact technology to be used. In general, if we think that people need to be able to move across these experiences and take their items and even their individual persona into these different experiences, then you have to have a way to figure out what is this thing that I'm bringing with me, how do I do it, and what are the standards that we're going to choose. So NFT seems to be the standards that are popping up. It might be a little bit different, but certainly we need that. Same as if we want to really create an environment that is socially entertaining, again, you have to allow them to express themselves in a different way. And finally, when it comes to creators, there have to be ways to remunerate fairly the creators, and maybe this is a way of doing it. Just from our standpoint, we're still watching it.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, Lindsay, you touched on this briefly. As a marketer, marketing is really moving towards the customer. So it's working with the customer and creating that immersive experience versus advertising at them. And I think, the metaverse is a great example. So, if you're a brand, how should brands be thinking about a strategy for the metaverse?
It's funny because the sales guy at InView after the fashion show, he's like, great, so what does this mean in our approach to brands? We can sell them so many impressions with native ads. And yeah, no, that game is actually like just part of the strategy now, because it's really understanding all of the touch points of your game or your space or your metaverse, whatever you want to call it, and providing value through the lens of the brand itself, and giving the consumer an opportunity to fall in love with that brand because they've provided more value to them. I'll share a real life example. At Coachella, a lot of brands activate at Coachella, and what they do is they offer water. And what does water do for a bunch of drunk concert goers? It hydrates them. And they're offering, a better experience. The brand is offering a better experience. That water might say AT&T on it, and they don't really care about that. But if they see AT&T, they gave me water at Coachella when I was dying of thirst. They remember that. That's this point of memory that you can build into the metaverse itself. So if I've got not just a branded good or a native ad and making that impression and clicking through to their site, I'm showing that they have access to VIP status on InView. I'm showing that they have true ownership with this NFT. They stand out amongst millions of other users. I'm giving them a fun event where they can meet so-and-so. And so it's just those multiple touch points come from a really creative understanding of your space, and then being able to create like an experience that provides a memory, and that's a result of that brand. And I think that's less of like what you can put in a brand deck. We talk to Burberry and we'll put the Burberry plaid all over our chat rooms, but that's not really selling an experience for the user. That's just throwing the plaid all over the chat room or the t-shirt. Yeah. And that's not going to work. That isn't at all what the experience is. So I think it's just experience inside of a virtual space is really where they need to go.
Yeah, you have to create some form of an emotional experience for the user. In these environments, if something doesn't strike them as emotional, it could be because they're having fun because it's a concert or it's a game or maybe it's a social cause that they like, but they're not going to interact, or at least they're not going to be authentic in their interactions. But if they do because they like the content that they're seeing or the experience that they're part of, or their friends are there, then they will go down a path of naturally trying out something, possibly naturally buying something. And it's a very different way of marketing to them, because you're not pushing anymore. You're placing yourself with your identity as a brand and your products in a specific experience, and then trying to get interactions and social interactions going and making that go naturally. So it's a little bit of flipping things around.
And would you say, I'd love to hear like what brands you think are doing it well, and maybe also what doesn't work well in the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, I totally agree with the experience in creating what is that interaction. To even do that, you need 3D versions of your product, and they need to be in the right formats. And if you're a brand doing it right, it needs to come like top down. It's not just the marketing and sales team, it's like your entire organization and how you manufacture, create that product from the beginning, and having that 3D model to use everywhere. And so that you can even be creating these amazing experiences in game before you even manufacture the real product. And then again, to your point, maybe you're just selling digital goods in the future and it's this whole new revenue stream, which they need to get on board with. But it's making sure your entire organization is aligned on what that end use case is and how you're creating it. Because right now, when I see like super siloed, huge companies, it's like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and everyone's creating different assets and don't know where they're going. So.
Yeah. I mean, we cannot agree more.
Yeah.
We're trying to push and explain to brands that you have to be metaverse ready. You have to have a library of high fidelity 3D assets, and then the experiences that then you can place on different platforms and that hopefully are the same, so you don't have to rework them. And for internal purposes, for R&D, even for training, for whatever else, or external. But if you don't have those, it's going to be very difficult for you to react and try to place yourself now in a sports, a sports show that's happening in some specific metaverse universe at a specific point. You're just not going to be ready, so you have to be ready.
Yeah, I think also, as I was saying earlier, putting the logo on a digital asset, whether it be a digital box or a digital person that is part of that particular platform's identity for their avatar, I just don't think that is the best way to communicate to a brand the true value of being metaverse ready. Because that has nothing to do with, the integrity of the item in the physical world. And so I think rather than putting, a square peg in a round hole where you just put a t-shirt on a box, it's like, how can you actually create that item with all the fidelity of the proper, 3D function, the files that are appropriate, so that it has its own unique presence within the digital world, no matter where it goes. I don't think you can fit a brand to mold to another brand depending on if that avatar is, a box or a triangle. If it's a humanoid avatar, the item on it should look as it does in the real world. So.
Yeah, I think that we've seen, from a brand perspective, and I guess my perspective is more on the NFT side, we've seen pure experimentation. And I think framing things as experimentation has really opened up just a lot of creativity and a lot of weird shit to happen, and without any expectations, which I think is still important for a while, because it's still, at least in regard with what we're doing, it's still in a fledgling kind of space. We're still getting to know things. One thing that I've seen work really well is whenever a fashion brand, or anyone for that matter, really respects the medium that they're creating for. So hypothetically, like this sweatshirt that I'm wearing also has a digital twin that Pleasure's made that you can wear in a couple games. And it looks way different than this because there's no fucking rules of physics in the game. And so there's like some like glowy electricity around it. There's also a hat that has like wings. And that's exciting. Like all of a sudden the rules have just completely changed. And so the brands that have really embraced that new medium, I think have done well, and it feels much more native to the environment. And I think that sort of authenticity is key.
And Donnie, maybe you can touch on, you started at the beginning about this, how brands need to allow user-generated content for this adoption to happen.
Yeah. I think that certainly places need to enable user-generated content. So let's say there's a lot that we could talk about for Unreal and things, but let's say hypothetically FIFA. People are fanatic about FIFA and they play it all the time, but you stare at your people wearing the same stuff every single time. So let's say hypothetically FIFA decides to publish a sneaker standard that any artist can use and build their own sneakers and sell inside of a FIFA marketplace. All of a sudden now FIFA can just take a small rake on let's say 1% of every sale that happens. And the idea would be that people would be changing their sneakers every single day like they do. They would represent themselves the way we change our clothes every day. It seems absolutely crazy that we don't enable that. I think most games today are kind of like North Korea. Here's the 10 things you get to wear. Come back in a month and it'll be 10 new things. And if you look at the GDP scoreboard of companies with a free market economy and those with not, it's obvious where there's a lot of money to be made. So I think that it's absolutely advantageous for games, places, to start thinking of themselves as, gaming is a bit of a subset of what actually happens in this virtual world. And part of your job and opportunity is to provide and facilitate economic activity. And so in that FIFA example, just by publishing that standard and having a marketplace baked into it, you now have creators that start selling, FIFA sneakers, and I can be competing again with Nike or Adidas or Puma. They still make sneakers anyway.
No, thank you. For each of you, what are you most excited about in digital fashion, the metaverse in 2022, which is around the corner?
Well, for me, brands are more and more creating digital lines of clothing or shoes or anything else. And many of them are actually user-generated, or at least in part designed by consumers themselves. So I think it will be very interesting to see who goes the furthest over the next year, and that's in apparel, shoes, but also beauty, and how beauty changes and how your image changes in the metaverse. I think it will be very interesting.
One of the things we haven't really touched on, but it kind of came up through some of the experiences that we went through with fashion is there's a lot of waste in fashion. You change a trend, a lot of things get thrown away. Fast fashion is kind of detrimental to the environment, frankly. You know, so I think when brands start to utilize these digital assets as a test market to reduce the waste on the production side, I think that could be really interesting to starting to reduce the carbon footprint for the fashion industry, the beauty industry, any digital any goods economy. Just because it actually, there's now a real relationship between the consumer and the digital asset that can provide expertise as to what to make and how much to make. That's kind of what we saw, and it'd be nice to see that space starts to reduce their carbon footprint through the capabilities that we have in ours.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what I'm really excited about, I mean, we've mentioned all these like big name brands, but it's actually accessible to smaller, medium-sized companies. I mean, you have Blender, which is this amazing free 3D tool. And you know, Apple announced Reality Kit 2 earlier this year, where you can actually create a pretty decent 3D scan with an iPhone Pro. So I think we're not that far away of an Etsy store being able to have 3D, you know, content, and it really is getting democratized. So that's what I'm most excited about.
And with that, Ashley, would you say maybe to give, like, what percentage of brands are you seeing having digital showrooms right now? Like, is that, how commonplace is that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, from the fashion perspective, like New Order and Jor, the two main B2B sales tools, a lot used, and they've all been mostly 2D. We'll have an announcement coming up soon where we're helping them do 3D. But it's like, so pretty much all brands have started selling digitally. It's just a matter of, okay, now we can do this in a spatial environment. And now it doesn't just have to be on the web. You could go into a virtual showroom in Unreal and you feel like you're walking the racks and picking up the clothes. And there's, you know, all different levels of that, I would say. So we're just gonna see it get better and better. But we have so many clients who are like, yeah, COVID, we went to digital because we couldn't get physical samples. We're never making physical samples again, which is pretty crazy.
And the level of fidelity and realism is increasing so much and so fast, both when it comes to environments, when it comes to the items themselves, or when it comes to digital humans, that it is changing a lot how you can present and represent a brand differently than it could before. So I think that that's also creating more of a you know, feeling of wanting to buy something, or almost like you're touching it.
So I, you know, kind of maybe a broken record, but most excited in 2022 about just individual creators having a bit more of a level playing field. I think we're going to see a handful of new games. I think there was an investor I was talking to last week that they're investing in something like 10 like NFT companies a week right now. Wow. And that are building games. And so I think that, you know, a lot of them might be not great, but I'm sure a few of them are going to be great. And I think all of them are going to provide opportunity for a new sort of creator economy that I think fashion will absolutely benefit from.
And are you guys seeing also brands testing out the marketplace? So, you know, you might launch a digital product, get feedback from the consumers, and then turning it actually into their line? Or is there a brand that's done that well?
Yeah.
Or has?
I actually have a funny one, because the item that one of the brands that we worked with, the name is Colleen Estrada, they're based out of New York City. They created this horse dress. They worked with one of our top animators on this horse dress that, I mean, there's no physics, right? So it's just like the horse head is the torso, and nobody bought it. And so it was kind of like the concept of failure of what not to create, except for the Met Gala. So
Yeah, I saw that.
so they like put it on the Met Gala red carpet because, you know, it was going to be the only one that was ever made in the physical form, and the physical form was actually really cool. The head designer actually wore it, and I kind of couldn't believe that they had created this horse dress, because not a single one sold, and they just used that to kind of like stand out. Yeah, one of the crazy themes of the Met Gala red carpet.
I do remember.
Yeah, and there are lots of items sometimes that are created, or I should say designed, but then they're not created and they're not sold. So those same designs, when they're ready, they can just be brought into a digital environment and used as digital items, which is happening for quite a few brands.
I do see a lot of items that I always wonder how it made it that far stores. But well, I would love to open it up to the audience. If there's any questions, you can step up to the mic. If not, we can continue. You can step up to the mic here.
Can I ask a question now?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'll preface this question by saying I'm a DeFi protocol developer, big believer in the ecosystem. However, you guys talked about democratization. And on that topic, how do you guys envision we prevent the metaverse and all these NFT ecosystems from just turning into plutocracies? Because right now, the amount of NFTs you have is directly proportional to the amount of capital you have. It's also, there's a big information asymmetry where if somebody's trying to buy something, you know, I can just look at their transaction, the mempool, front run them, pay more gas, do all these things, and then rip them off somehow. So where's the balance there with like, yeah, NFTs allow you to sell things and own things, but then you're just turning that good into a capital market where it's just going to get played by hedge funds and et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now the only way to really create and to get an NFT is to mint an NFT. I think in the metaverse and whatever constellation of places you spend time that is the metaverse, I think there'll be other things that you can do to actually, you know, be rewarded with a good or a service. So I think that that's one big part of it. I also think that when this hits, when it's in a space where there's actually, I guess, whatever sort of utopian opportunity there is, I think a lot of the NFT of things in the protocol level of things will be abstracted. In the same way that I don't think people really, you know, might not like Instagram, but you just don't really give a shit like which database things are in, like what they're using. So I mean, I think that's probably have like an hour-long conversation about this. But I think it's having a certain level, like a thoughtful level of abstraction of, you know, at what point is, you know, the protocol or the NFT exposed to the end user versus it just being a part of whatever they're already doing in this place. I don't know if that's.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can talk more about that for sure.
Hey, my name's Cameron. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I'm curious where you think fashion will have the biggest impact in the metaverse. You know, is it a vertical of gaming where you have a certain Fortnite skin that's really fashionable and important, or is it more of an open world, or is it maybe, you know, going to be used for, you know, the social town square in the metaverse where you want to look really good? I'd love to know, based on what you guys have learned from IMVU and throughout, like where does fashion matter the most?
Well, I think the purchase behavior of our consumers today, they buy new items all the time, especially with the changing of a season or an event or a holiday. So I think if brands are going to have the same kind of changeover with trends and styles and new collections with the real world, that's endless. That is, you know, that just rolls on till the end of time, you know, because people love to buy new things. That's part of the problem of why there's such a massive carbon footprint with the fashion industry today. So I think if they really lean into the consumer purchase behavior that is the same as the real world, only they have more access to purchase because they have, you know, it costs less. I think that could be really interesting because then your collections can also expand. It's not just the 10 different items in the 4 different colorways that you have for the separates that you're offering in the fall-winter collection. It's like, what are the NFTs? What are the, you know, 50,000 things that you're creating? And some of them have nothing to do with the physics of our human bodies. It's just like an experience or an action or a pose or an interaction with another avatar. It's really endless. So, you know, I think the impact is massive. They understand that the opportunity to tap into that purchase behavior is really powerful.
Interesting, thank you.
Totally agree.
Hi, my name is Raymond Moscow. I have a question in regards to the concept of interoperability, right? You know, there's a lot of different, there are, I'm going to say like some kind of metaverses right now. There's a lot of kind of up and coming ones. And this concept of being able to use assets in between, how are brands taking that into consideration? You know, I feel like there's kind of this bottom-up sort of perspective that there's a lot of artists that are really interested in kind of this kind of level of technology that are taking that into consideration. But then, you know, I own the Balenciaga Knight, you know, Fortnite skin. I've driven the Ferrari in Fortnite, but I also recognize that that is kind of a walled garden where those assets are going to live. Are brands asking these questions, or have they not started to take this consideration yet in regards to these sort of interactions with these type of assets?
I think brands are trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with it, and that's why we at Epic or Unreal Engine particularly, we try to strive and to stress this idea that you have to be able to carry everything across. There have to be open standards. Then, if you want to put it in Fortnite, and Fortnite it's its own game, that's one thing. But you need to be able to reuse that same asset somewhere else. So even when you're talking about Ferrari, that asset actually was created for their websites and for a website configurator, and then it was reused with a virtual background to actually shoot a virtual commercial. And then it was brought into Fortnite. So it's the same asset that can be reused across different things. And then exactly how different metaverses or experiences or worlds are going to want to open up their borders, so to speak, that's unclear.
And I mean, from like the 3D asset perspective, like we're part of the Kronos group. A lot of different companies are pushing for standards in 3D and really pushing for GLB and GLTF to be the standard. So as long as you're building with that standard, then you can at least take it everywhere. So I know we're actually trying to get some of our, you know, fashion and furniture clients to also join the Kronos group, because I was like, well, we're all industry people in here. We need to get the brands in here too, so everyone is using the same thing, right?
Yeah, so this is a question that we get quite a bit from brands that want to, you know, let's say they want to live in a place that is voxely like Minecraft and a place that is not voxely like Minecraft, and those things look completely different. The best suggestion that we've had so far that I think has started to resonate well is that we already sort of have a precedent for this idea of, you know, making something that has to follow the rules in order to operate somewhere. So kind of like look at the automobile industry. Like if you buy like a Volkswagen Passat, it's a Passat across the whole planet. But if it's a Passat in like this country, the steering column's on this side. If it's in this country, maybe the bumpers have to have a different set of rules, or the, you know, emission standards. And so effectively this idea where you can create this idea of one thing, but it has multiple variants in order to operate in specific places. I think to the extent that games and places in other, whatever it may be, apps start to think of themselves as like sort of sovereign nations of rules, and then I think that that will help. Where you're not necessarily creating one thing. You're creating, I have the ownership of like this sweatshirt, but this sweatshirt has multiple different asset files that are associated. So depending on where I go and connect my wallet and have access to this sweatshirt, it manifests differently because that's how it should be. That's kind of how we've been approaching it. And by the way, going back earlier when I mentioned this, this like pirate game, that was actually based on a true story where in 2018 I saw an a very like fun like isometric pirate game where you drive your pirate ship around and you blow up other pirate ships and stuff. And you could bring in your CryptoKitty, and the attributes of that cat, the CryptoKitty would be your flag, and the attributes of that cat would modify what your boat could do, how fast it could go, what its defenses were. And obviously that messes with game state and balance and things of that nature, but it's fun to think about. Like, you know, it's really interesting.
Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so with the way that it's going with digital fashion, how do you feel partnerships and collaborations between big brands will change with the creator economy coming? There's probably going to be some competition. So where do you see that playing out?
I literally just had that exact same conversation internally. So branded goods is a play in the metaverse when you already have an established creator economy with independent people that are making real life value based on the sales of their items. And we're like, cool, let's go after all these brands and show them what we did in the fashion show. And then if we brought in Supreme or you know, Balenciaga or you know, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, that would create so much competition with our creator community, because then they're going to start to take over the mind share of what people really want, because they want that aspirational version of themselves that they can afford in the metaverse. And so we kind of, it's still a conversation that we're having. But I think the opportunity is to, and this is the model that through which we executed the fashion show, is we put the creator and the designer together. And the creators actually made all of those items, and it was this really interesting collaboration of the sketch that would create the physical garment. The creator is modeling it in 3D using Blender or whatever, and there's this really cool feedback loop that's happening. I think the complication comes in the sense of like, well, who's gonna make money off of the millions of sales of that Supreme asset? And it's almost like creating some kind of revenue share, which then you have to deal with your margins for the companies. It becomes a very layered conversation. So I kind of, we're exploring, looking at like, look how Target has had all these guest designers. So it's so-and-so for Target, so-and-so for Target. So imagine if it was like the so-and-so creator that is an influencer in their own right because they've established themselves in the space. They've elevated themselves like any TikTok influencer would. And it's them for Kalina Strada, them for so-and-so. So then it kind of embraces, it's a handshake and hopefully a revenue share, like a golden handshake between the two parties, so that way there's some kind of like cooperation that's happening instead of a monopoly of these big brands that make the little guys look even smaller.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so I want to thank Raphael, Donna, Lindsay, and Ashley for helping put this together, and thank you, everyone. Awesome.